Reminder to keep yourselves muted. For those of you who are new to Zoom, a couple things. Your mute button is in the lower left-hand corner if you're using a computer or an iPad. If it's on a phone, if you're using a phone, you got to kind of search for it. Also, we have a chat box that we really utilize quite a bit. And especially as people kind of are sharing, the chat box is a wonderful way. For example, Allie has already sent us a chat saying, hi, y'all, I'm listening while driving. Hello, Allie. So open up your chat box and you'll take a look down at the bottom. You'll see what says to everyone, and everyone's in a big blue bubble. And you can write to everyone, or you could click on that little blue bubble arrow and send a private message to any individual that you want to send a private message to. So that's the chat box is something we utilize. And I want to invite everybody to take a minute now, unless you're driving, to close your eyes. And let's just start with some conscious breathing. And conscious breathing is just breathing at your own pace. And tuning in to your body, kind of shutting out whatever you might have been thinking about or doing before coming to class. I always like to start by really connecting to ourself. So perhaps on every exhale, you're releasing, letting go of thoughts, letting go of anything that no longer serves you. And on the inhale, coming back to center, whatever center might mean to you. Could be your third eye, your heart, your power center, your hara. And as you come into your center and you tune into yourself, what does your body have to say? Our body informs us in many ways. Learning to listen to our body is very important. It's a big part of Love Coach Academy. Learning to listen to others, learning to listen to the different parts of ourselves. And right now we're just practicing listening to our very own body. Are there places in your body where there's discomfort that you hadn't noticed until just now? That's okay if there is. You can adjust or even acknowledge it. What emotions might you be feeling right now? Are you relaxed? Still a little bit sleepy? Excited? Anxious? Curious? What are some of the emotions you can identify within yourself? I want to invite you to remember a time in your life when you learned something about yourself that was very valuable. You learned something about yourself that was valuable. And I'm going to invite anyone who's willing to share it with the group. Some of you will share it verbally to the entire group. And some of you will put it into the chat box. And if some of you don't want to share, that's totally okay. It's always interesting to hear. So when you're ready, when you're clear on a moment in your life where you really learned something interesting about yourself or valuable about yourself, open your eyes. For those of you whose cameras are off, I certainly invite you to please turn your cameras back on because we want to have the full experience of seeing you. I'm just going to invite those of you who share verbally to keep it to about a minute or less, simple, and I'll model it. What came to mind was when I was in high school and I was in my high school drama class, And my teacher, who had gotten to know me quite well because I was very extroverted and very assertive about creating plays and doing them, introduced me to the class as an entrepreneur. He said, Scott Katamas is an entrepreneur. And I didn't even know what that word meant. But he recognized that in me. And most of my life, I have been an entrepreneur. And so that was a really significant awareness of myself. So thank you, James Raleigh, wherever you are, up in heaven. Who else would like to share an experience of their life? And for any of you who want to, you can put it in the chat box. For those of you who are more shy, you can write in the chat box. But who else would be willing to share verbally to the group an experience where you learned something significant about yourself and what that was? Who's willing to share? Oh, I just see Schick Lots, and I'm not sure what your name is, but I'm unmuting you. And I'm putting the spotlight on you, and thank you for raising your hand. And tell us your name. Oh, you know what? You're still muted, so I need you to unmute yourself.
Okay, there we go.
There you go. Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. The thing that came to my mind, it's been a huge one for me, is that I discovered when I'm in the presence of someone that's angry, I used to become a 5-year-old little girl, and I would respond the same way I did to my mom when she was angry. And so I actually kind of had a deja vu experience of seeing myself as a 5-year-old responding to something in the present moment.
Wow.
And it was quite a huge awakening. And so ever since then, I've been developing other alternative ways to respond to someone that's angry.
Wonderful, what a wonderful sharing. That's all Twinkle here in Love Coach Academy. We twinkle people. So that's all Twinkle here. Thank you so much. Thank you. Who else would like to share? Oh, great. Laura, I was kind of counting on you to do so. Spotlight's on you, Laura.
Yeah, so one thing, like it reminded me, Scott, when you talked about this guy who reflected to you. When I was 5 years old, my mom, we were at the kitchen table, you know, you remember the visual and the sensory, and we were eating dinner, and she just kind of pulled me aside, and my family was there, and she said, listen, I want you to realize that you are different than other people in the way that you need more connection. And you need, and I didn't understand. I'm only 5. I'm like, what are you talking about? But I didn't say anything to her, but she said, you know, and some people are going to love it, and other people are going to be, you know, not appreciate it so much, and you might get hurt. And I said that was, I was 5. I was like, but over the years, I really lean into and feel what she was trying to say in a protective way for me and my sensitive heart. So I never forgot that.
Wow, that's an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that. And it's true, it's so beautiful, your value for connections. Let's all twinkle Laura, and let's all remember to give Laura lots of connection. So you can send her little chat box messages maybe. Who else would like to share? Who else would like to share? Daniel, my buddy on the Big Island that I'm going to be with in a few days.
I'm really looking forward to that, Scott. And, you know, happy anniversary, or, you know, thank you for sharing such a tender and deep, special moment with us, with me on Facebook today, with everybody. And just, it's just beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah. So I had a teacher in high school. He was the art teacher, and his name was Mr. Doolittle.
Mr. Doolittle.
Yeah, isn't that great?
I love it.
And he had exercise. You know, everybody had to take art class, intro to art, and we had to like write the alphabet over and over and over and over and over again until we understood the aesthetics of handwriting. And early on, he like pulled me aside and he said, you know what, you don't have to do that. I'm going to give you this special room in the back. And he gave me 2 clear light bulbs and a little light in this little cubicle, and the rest of the room was dark. And he said, take as long as you want, but I want you to make me a drawing of these 2 clear light bulbs.
Wow.
And so I took a couple of weeks and came up with a beautiful pencil drawing of light bulbs. And it just made me feel like I had, like he saw something in me that artistically and creatively, and it just turned the direction of my life, and I started focusing on art, and I studied art for the rest of high school and college, and now I've been a professional artist for 20 years. And I just want to thank Mr. Doolittle for seeing something in me and nurturing it and supporting me.
Oh my God, that's beautiful. That's all Twinkle Daniel, and that's what Twinkling Daniel. We are twinkling Dr. Doolittle.
Dr. Doolittle.
Mr. Doolittle. You know, and isn't that a beautiful story? What a, you know, it's also appropriate because Daniel, Laura, some of the other people on this call, Deborah, Michaela, are all part of Love Coach Academy and are going to be either have or will inspire others, you know, through love coaching. So, you know, it's really, it's a beautiful experience to mentor someone or to really see a gift in someone. Like I keep saying, Dr. Doolittle. Mr. Doolittle saw in Daniel, Mr. Raleigh saw in me, Laura's mom saw in herself. Beautiful stories. 1 or 2 more, and also, again, if people are shy, put it into the chat box. Mark, all the way, are you in Germany, Mark?
Can you hear? Is Mike okay?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you.
So when I was taking this university class down in Florida, and there was one professor I took all these classes with because he was like this hippie guy and I really liked him. I think I took like 8 of his courses, and I was moving to New York, and I, you know, sent him a note, said I would be leaving, and you know how appreciative I was of his teachings. And I said, do you have any advice for me? And he wrote back, he said, yes, just always remember that even the devil can quote the scriptures. And I was stunned by it, and it stayed with me my whole life. And it was always like a checkpoint to not being pulled into the wrong places or the wrong energy, I guess. And just really checking out to exactly what was behind what people were saying to me. And I just, it was really valuable advice. So.
That's wonderful advice. And what was, do you remember his name?
Oh God, I don't know. It was 40 years ago.
Okay, fair enough. All right, well, let's all twinkle Mark. And maybe one more story. One more person willing to share? I'm looking for a hand to be raised. Mariko, wonderful. All right, Mariko. Spotlight's on you. You need to unmute yourself.
Are we supposed to talk about childhood or adulthood?
It could be either. Just a time that you learned something that really impacted your life.
Okay, a fellow coach had just taught me, Philippe Lewis, about attachment styles through his work on Facebook. So I had learned about avoidant, dismissive, and fearful avoidant attachment styles. Mm-hmm. And then I fell in love with a fearful avoidant and was basically ghosted on and suddenly. And I was able to apply this pattern to the relationship, and it was like, for some reason, able to heal me, that knowledge that these people would have always left, and it wasn't about me. And so I was in Okinawa, and it was 2017. But I remember just, like I can timeline all these points of significant healing. And that's one of them, where I went from crying to like really being able to celebrate this breakthrough. And I wrote, "It's okay," which is Daijobu in Japanese, in the sand. And I was just like overjoyed, about that breakthrough.
Wow, thank you, Mariko. I really appreciate Let's All Twinkle Mariko. And that's a really pertinent and wonderful story, because it informs us of how, when we get a certain amount of knowledge or information about patterning or relationships, that we can feel better about ourselves or have a greater understanding. And for any of you who are not familiar with what she was referencing, I'll briefly tell you, because it's actually valuable. I was just teaching this yesterday at my class here at the retreat. It's the science of attachment. And ideally, we want to experience our relationships as secure attachment. But there are some people, based on their experiences in life, that develop what can be known as anxious attachment. And those are the people that tend to grasp for attention. When they're not getting enough attention, maybe they get scared and they grasp for it. They're not bad or wrong, it's just a way of getting their need for attention met. Then there are people that are kind of on the opposite end of the scale, that are avoidant. And avoidants are people who might be have a fear of engulfment, a fear of a certain level of intimacy. And all of us have what I call an intimacy threshold, all of us, and so sometimes when we hit like a level of intimacy that's more than we can manage, or more than we believe our ego thinks we can manage, we pull back. And of course, inevitably, people that are experiencing someone as anxious tend to become avoidant. And then people that are avoidant create anxiety. And it's interesting because it could go both ways. In my relationship, many of you knew, and some of you worked with Emily when I was with her. And Emily, very public about how she was very avoidant, which made me a little bit anxious. But then I've also been in relationships with women that were very anxious that made me avoidant. So there's no right or wrong. It often is a polarization there. And just bringing it back to what Mariko shared, how wonderful that she learned that, okay, if I choose to be in a relationship with someone who is avoidant by nature, I'm probably going to experience that they're not reaching out for connection quite the way that I want, and it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me. That's a good example. I'm appreciating some of the people now are beginning to put things into the chat box. And so thank you, Mimi, who's also known as Radiance, and Laura, Michaela, Chick. Thank you very much for putting this in the chat box. All right, I am about to take us on a journey of the 10 pillars of self-mastery. And I want to invite, some of you may want to just jot down some notes. So you can use like another page on your computer if you wish, or you can just grab a piece of paper and a pen. It's not essential, and we are recording this, so you can always go back and watch the recording. I love the people that do that. That's really always quite wonderful. So here we go. I'm going to be sharing the screen. And we're going to go back and forth between share screen and comments and thoughts from some of you. But can everybody see the what I've got sharing on the screen there? Mark, you're who shows up in a box. Can you see that? Where it says 10 Pillars of Self-Mastery? Give me a thumbs up. Yeah. Okay, great. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask each of you, as we take a look at each of these pillars, to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being where you're just not very good at this, it's something you really want to cultivate more of, and 10 where you feel like you've really mastered it. Okay? And just be playful. The numbers are going to be just for yourself unless you want to share it with others. And we will have an opportunity for people to share if they want to. It's always voluntary. So our first pillar of self-mastery is really the foundation of my teaching, and it's self-responsibility. Self-responsibility. To what degree do you take 100% responsibility for your thoughts, your feelings, and your needs? And that's such a fundamental part of compassionate communication, of Love Coach Academy. It's really learning to recognize that everything we're thinking, everything we're feeling, everything that we need or that we value, that's ours. Nobody can make us think anything. People stimulate us, people do what they do, and we react with our thoughts, or we react with our feelings, or we have certain needs that are being met or not being met. But we're 100% responsible for that. When we're first learning this about ourselves, sometimes there's resistance because we've been living in the idea that other people can make us angry or make us sad. But ultimately, this is a very empowering way of understanding life and our relationship to life. So again, just on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you rate yourself on really being in the awareness that you're 100% responsible for your thoughts, feelings, and needs? I'm going to come back to the group for a moment and just ask, does anybody have anything that comes up for them? Anything that you want to share with the group that comes up when you look at this particular Mimi, and then Daniel?
Yes, one piece that I'm recognizing is I've been teaching this emotional literacy course, and one piece that I think plays into that is if people don't know what are my emotions, what are my feelings, where am I being activated, what are my needs, my values, and what are my boundaries, I would think that 100% probably goes down pretty significantly if you don't have those core understandings, and if those pieces you think have to do with other people. So that's just an observation that I was thinking about. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mimi. It's great to have you with us. That's a good observation. Daniel.
Hi. So I noticed that I have an intention to be 100% responsible. And a lot of times in a moment, I will not, like the voice, the stories in my head will come in half of a second, 10 stories in half of a second, and I'll make it all about the other person. But I think I'm able to recognize that most of the time, and then do a process or meditate and realize that, and own it, do a process of clearing and owning that it actually has nothing to do with the other person, and it's everything to do with me. And I definitely haven't gotten to the place where it's 100% in the moment. I can lose it.
So honest. So let's all twinkle Daniel there for a moment. And while we're twinkling Daniel, can you share briefly the process you use that does help you to come back into the awareness?
So it's a clearing process that I practice with my men's group. I'm in Mankind Project, and it's a very powerful process where the premise is when anybody goes into the process, it's okay. I have to at least intellectually realize that it's all about me and it's not about the other person. And that's the ground that you need to start from. And then from there, just go into the judgments, and just all the judgments that I'm afraid to say out loud, the ones that are in my head, and then say those, and then then the next step is, okay, what are the feelings that brings up? And then recognize you know, when was it the first time I experienced this same recipe of feelings, this same mixture? And usually it's something from 6 years old or younger, you know? And then oftentimes you'll just drop into that feeling. And sometimes it starts out with anger and then tears. But then there's another process you can go to from there. But in this process, you just come back to the present, back to the room, and then look again at the person and acknowledge, hey, you know what? This has a lot to do with something that happened in the past. And I just remove that projection of the part, at least the part that's from my past, that I'm projecting and making up about you. And then setting the intention, what do I want for myself? What I want is, I want to recognize this sooner so I don't project it on you, as an example. And then what do I want between us? I want connection, and I want clarity and love between us. And then oftentimes the process feels very complete in that moment. And it really works. I've owned it, and it gets clear. The other person understands more where I'm coming from. And they have an opportunity to own whatever like they see in themselves too, in that process. And it's wonderful. And then we have another version that's specifically for couples, because this one tends to be more, since it's in my men's group, more of a masculine process that doesn't always work in like an intimate relationship, but that's what works for me.
Let's give Daniel a really big twinkling. That was a wonderful, wonderful teaching from you, Daniel. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to go back to our, Kelsey. Okay, Kelsey, you got your hand up just in time. And then we're going to go back to, but if, again, I'm going to have people share a little bit. Always love when people put in the chat box if you don't get a chance to share about something verbally. And thank you, Deborah Haviland, for all that you wrote about attachment style. Kelsey, you're up.
Hi. So I've done a lot of work on this, and I feel that I am in a place in my life where I can safely say that I take 100% responsibility. And I think a huge game changer for me in coming to that place was realizing that I'm not responsible for other people and their emotions and their actions and their feelings, but honoring them where they are and like recognizing where I am with that. And even if I don't agree or feel okay with that, knowing that that's okay and that I can honor them where they are and know that it's a part of their process.
Beautiful. That's such an important part of this. So twinkling for Kelsey. Thank you, Kelsey. That's really, really valuable. Thank you, everybody, for what you're sharing. And I'm really appreciating, I'll go back and read all of the chat box comments after the class is over. So thank you, everybody. Okay, we're going to go back to our survey here, and we're going to go into the next one. So the next one is making choices with consciousness, opposed to egoic or default pattern reactions. So in other words, when something happens in the external world and we have to make a choice, are we really making that choice with awareness, with consciousness, or is it just a habitual reaction? And again, this is a really, really important one because, again, in Love Coach Academy, so much of our work is learning how to live in our frontal lobe. In our frontal lobe, that's the empathy center of the brain. It's where the observer part of the brain is, and that's where we can see the big picture and really have empathy for ourselves, have empathy for the other, and be awake, be aware, be responsive. Whereas the opposite is when our reptile brain takes over and we perceive the possibility of attack and we react, right? And when we react, it's almost always habitual. It's not conscious. And also when the reptile brain is reacting, our only choices are fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So to what degree, and of course it depends on the situation, of course, but to what degree do you really make conscious choices that you're moving? And that the key to that is going slow. You got to move slow to do that. When we're fast in our choices, we're more reactive, habitual, patterned response. When we slow down, take it in, that's where we're more likely to make a more conscious choice. How many of you have heard my story about the Dalai Lama and where the synapses fire in his brain? Who's heard that? Michaela and Daniel. All right, well, I'm going to repeat that story. I hope you don't mind. Because it's a beautiful example of this very element of self-mastery. The Dalai Lama allowed brain researchers to hook up electrodes to his brain, and they scanned his brain and did research for about 90 minutes. And they found that at all times, the synapses were entirely firing in his frontal lobe and in his temporal lobe, never in the back part of the brain, never in the reptile brain, not once. Even when at the end of or towards the end of the research, they showed him photographs of Chinese soldiers burning down a Tibetan temple. And he looked at these photographs and he wept. He didn't stuff his feelings, he wept. But the synapses were still firing in the frontal lobe, the empathy center of the brain. The researchers took it one step further. They asked him, how do you really feel? What do you think when you think about Chinese soldiers raping Tibetan women, murdering Tibetan people? He thought about it and he wept. Again, he was not stuffing his emotions. But then after a very long time, and they noticed that the synapses were still firing up here in the frontal lobe, in the empathy center of the brain. After a very long time, he responded and said, it reminds me that I must pray equally for the Chinese soldiers as I do for my Tibetan people. Now, I love this story because this story reflects where we are going as a species. That's where humankind is going. We're moving from reptile brain, survival-based reactive living into really being conscious in our choices, having empathy for ourselves and empathy for the other. Now, most of us are not going to have to cope with people we care about being murdered, but we all have to cope with people saying things to us that are hurtful, doing things that we react to. And so such a big part of Love Coach Academy and what we learn here is how to really manage our reptile brain and keep coming back into the frontal lobe, even when we get triggered. That was the class that I taught yesterday. It was 2.5 hours, all about how to manage when we're triggered. How to manage that by coming into the frontal lobe, having empathy for ourselves, taking good care of ourselves, but not necessarily at the expense of another, because we care equally about the Chinese soldiers as we do about the Tibetan people. We care equally about that other person, even if they're saying something hurtful to us, as we care about ourselves. And that's why it's so important to learn how to slow down and be responsive in our thoughts, to be responsive in how we respond to difficult circumstances. So anyway, that's kind of what's up in this second one that we just took a look at. Time for maybe one response. Anybody have anything they want to share on this particular one? Okay, we're going to move on then. So the third slide, the third one that we're going to look at is self-reflection. How do you do with self-reflection throughout the day? And Daniel did a wonderful job of demonstrating self-reflection when he talked about, okay, when did I get triggered? And his process of going back, wow, how far back does that trigger go? How far back does that pain go? That requires self-reflection. And self-reflection is at the foundation of emotional intelligence. We are teaching 3 primary tools in Love Coach Academy. We're teaching and learning and practicing together compassionate communication, the foundational tools I learned from Marshall Rosenberg. We're studying emotional intelligence skill building, and the foundation of that is self-reflection. And we're also studying neuroscience, how to change the pathways of the brain. And I like that in this slide it says, throughout each day. So throughout each day, how often do you stop and self-reflect? Wow, how could I have managed that conversation in a different way? Wow, what's going on inside of me? When we started with our meditation and I had you check into your body, it was a moment of self-reflection. What's going on? What's my body telling me right now? Oh, I'm noticing that I need more water. I need to go to the bathroom. Wow. Oh, notice I've got this little chink in my back that needs some support. Wow, I notice I'm feeling anxious. I wonder what that's all about. See, when we self-reflect, we get in touch with all the things that our body might be informing us of. So, does anybody want to share what comes up for them around self-reflection? Mimi, you know, I had a feeling, I kept looking at you, I had a feeling Mimi might have something to say about this. I swear to you, I was thinking of an example with you, so.
I might have one.
Yeah.
Scott has been kind enough to be sitting beside me as I am looking at a major hemisphere within the things that I've agreed to in my life. So I just really want to take a moment around ownership of this. And what I find is the most beautiful, like for me, I feel like I have a significant amount of emotional health in my life. And then for the past 3 years, like I was really in an environment where I didn't have my boundaries. So I had one significant part of this is that I recognize that until we're 27, looking at the brain science, that the prefrontal lobes aren't, it's not fully developed yet. All of the neuro pathways have not been fully developed, at least for generations of about 35 and up. I don't know yet about the younger generations. So with that, we're not making all of the decisions based on what we would be deciding after the age of 27. And knowing that a lot of the blueprints were created before the age of 27, like the love blueprints, the intimacy blueprints, a lot of those were created before that age. One piece that I recognized was that I had based my reactions and the way that I was acting based on an earlier blueprint that wasn't serving me anymore. So one of the key pieces of this was coming to a really good, strong no to close out old patterns. And then the self-reflection goes back into like, okay, for the past 3 years, I've been experiencing this. How do I create a roadmap out of here where in low enough doses over a long enough period of time where I can really do a lot of good self-care and loving people from a distance. So I don't know that all came through, but that's like one major piece and one major core that I'm looking at is the self-reflection of going back into those early things that I agreed to before I was 27 and that I really thought were something that I needed to hold on to, how I've created patterns like that in my life going forward. And now that I'm almost 50, how do I clear that and go in with my full yes?
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Mimi.
Yes.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Great teaching. Okay, I saw a couple hands actually raised, so we're going to go with Amara and then Laura Chekanovitz. So Amara, if you can unmute yourself, and then we'll hear from her, and then we'll hear from Laura.
Hi, hello everyone.
Hi.
So I'll try to make it really brief, but basically I have a very unique perspective of learning as a medical doctor, how different things influence. So I think everybody knows that when your hormones are out of whack, you're a lot more likely to be triggered. And this happens for men too. And now that we're approaching the full moon, you know, there's other influences. So it was really great to reflect upon the responsibility and the choices. Because in the last 2 years, I've had the profound grace of having some amazing discoveries through medical knowledge about how our brains can actually be sick and have it affect all of our triggers. So different types of chemicals, toxins, electromagnetic frequencies, all these things, and heavy metals specifically. And so since I've been detoxing my own body, it's become more and more effortless to remain in a feeling of connected space to spirit, so that I automatically go to empathy and can take a pause because my nervous system isn't wired, like fried. So I'm profoundly grateful to eventually bring this knowledge to the masses, because I believe that it will heighten all of our connection, not only to source, but also to each other. And so I feel really, really grateful to find an easier path than the Dalai Lama had, probably.
Thank you, Amara. Let's all twinkle Amara, and that's such an important thing. It's easy to say these tools, but yeah, we need to be well resourced. And there are so many different factors, as Amara has pointed out, that we need to be aware of, and learning how each of those factors impacts us. I mean, I think we probably all have friends that EMF just wipes them out. And some of us are blessed to be okay and not at least notice the impact in the same way that people that might be more sensitive to EMF as an example. You know, another one I want to just mention is many of us, including some of you probably, may have been raised in a household that wasn't safe. Maybe a parent that was an alcoholic or a rageaholic. And so you developed a very low-grade anxiety because you were having to be hypervigilant, always hypervigilant. So you couldn't just relax in your home, but you had to always be paying attention. Am I safe? Is dad gonna go off on me? Is dad gonna go off on mom? Right? And so people that have had something like that in their life, or even PTSD, you know, it creates a whole different, it requires a lot more effort to be responsive because you've had to live in reptile brain reactivity for so long. And it's important for all of us, if we don't have that background, I don't have that background, I'm blessed at a safe and secure household, to be very patient with people that have had that background. Not just label them as neurotic, but to recognize that they had to live in a state of hypervigilance, and it impacts them today as an adult. They're still healing from that. They're still working with that. So, Laura, I need to learn how to pronounce your last name, but Laura C, for right now I'll say Laura C, because we've got 2 Lauras with us. Would love to hear what you have to say, and if you can turn your camera on, that would be wonderful.
Hi, I don't think I'm quite ready to turn the camera on this time, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'll change to more of a sort of moniker like many other people have, so people don't even have to worry about my last name. But anyway, thank you for the attempt. What I wanted to talk about in terms of self-reflection is, I've been thinking a lot about how it's not that I don't think at all, but I do have a lot of trouble understanding my emotions, predicting the emotions of others, which is one of the reasons I signed up for the class. But one thing is that I'm, in some ways at least, I'm very extroverted, especially in my thought process. Through discussion and talking, that's how I can do a lot of my thinking. And I think I know other people have an easier time doing that all internally. So I'm just wondering, how do you deal with that, or help foster those skills in someone who's more external in their reflection process? Yeah, like any tips or breakdown of that would be helpful.
Wow, this is a wonderful question. And I see that Chick has a thought about that, so I'll call on Chick in a minute. Well, we never want to tell someone what to do. Ideally, we want to model it ourselves. So my first thought as I heard the question was just to share and ask, hey, can I share with you something that I'm finding is really helpful for me? I'm noticing that the more I self-reflect, the more I enjoy life, or the more, and then you share your process, very much like Daniel did. Daniel did a wonderful job of modeling how he self-reflects and how he manages himself. And I teach this stuff, and yet as I was listening to Daniel, I got inspired because I was listening to another human being share in his own words, his own experience. So it's always, I believe, most, or almost always, I shouldn't say always, almost always, most effective to share from our own example of how we do it and see if that inspires the other. Chick, did you want to say something about this? And if so, please unmute yourself.
Okay, there we go. One of the things that I use actually on all three of these points that you gave us, self-reflection and self-responsibility, I tend to use my body, notice my body, and my body helps me become more aware when I notice what my body's doing. For example, I shared, how I became a 5-year-old in the face of someone that's angry. What clued me in was someone was angry at me, and I noticed that I was that I always get in a specific body position when someone's angry. And it would be, I would stand with my one hand holding the other, head down, and I would say, what can I do so you won't be mad? So this repeating body movement I started paying attention to that. And I realized that, that's what I did when I was a 5-year-old. And so it really brought that forward. And so I was able to become present now when I'm in the face of someone, when I'm with someone that's angry. And now I can use my body. I definitely don't go into that body position. And, it's just noticing my body helps me to get more present. And I ask the question, how am I the source of what's happening? And my body is kind of one of my first clues when my body doesn't feel comfortable or just tense or not peaceful.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you very much. Let's all twinkle Chick. All right, we've got 7 more of these, so I'm going to get back to, let's take a look at the next one. Thank you, everybody, for these beautiful sharings. Also, what's going on in the chat box. Really appreciating seeing there's a lot of fun stuff going on there. Okay, the next one is, this is my hardest one. I always score lowest on this, just being truthful. Owning the consequences of my actions, choices, and behaviors on myself and others. That's a tough one, isn't it? You know, it's so hard when we make a choice that has a harmful effect on somebody else, especially someone we love and care about. That's such a difficult one. And so how do you do with that? Again, grading yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. How do you do? You might find again that there are certain people that it's really hard for you to own your stuff with. Usually it's hardest for us to own our shit with our significant other. If we are blessed or challenged, depending on how the relationship is going. If we're blessed or challenged to have a significant other, often that's where we have the most trouble. Mimi, I saw you raise your hand.
Yes, I was just thinking about growing up in an alcoholic family. I was used to being blamed for everything. And then going through a lot of 12-step programs, I learned about codependency and how, it's their stuff. And so making that transition, especially if I've been in unhealthy relationships, like I noticed that that was kind of my wheelhouse recently, was I'm happy to own my stuff if they own their stuff. But the transition to I'm happy to own my stuff because it's my stuff, I'm still like, I get it here, but it's like to do it without the FU is the area that I'm moving into now.
I love that, Sharon. That's so, our motto in Love Coach Academy is how perfectly human, Mimi. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Mark.
For me, I think it's, I know it's a process. If it's something that, has a lot of fire and I got triggered in, I could pretty quickly fall into a victim role and feel that, something was done to me. But usually after I calm down and I get grounded, then I'm really good at it. Mm-hmm. But, I need some space between it before I can do that.
Yeah, that's a really important thing. Big twinkling. That's the whole point, isn't it? We got to slow down. We need that spaciousness before we can do that. Thank you. All right, I'm going to go back to our chart here. And the next one is honesty.
Oh, shoot. Could I quickly ask a question about the last one?
Sure. Hold on, let me go back. Okay.
I'm so sorry.
And who is it?
I just wanted, this is Laura, sorry.
Okay, hi Laura.
I tried to raise my hand, but hi. I was just wondering about how do we differentiate this from self-responsibility? So it gets a little confusing to me there between owning the consequences and accepting that everyone is responsible for their own responses and emotions. So if you did something which made somebody feel bad.
Yeah, I think exactly. Self-responsibility and self-reflection, I guess, is kind of a broader canvas. But really, I think you just answered your own question, Laura. It's owning the consequences is the key word. There is consequences. When we've made a choice that has had a consequence, usually one that's harmful or hurtful, that we go, oh, wow, okay, yeah. My tone of voice, my not choosing to be considerate had an impact on my lover, right? So it's the key there is consequences. Debbie Garcia, I saw you raise your hand. You want to say something?
Unmute. Okay. Hi. Sorry, guys. I'm on my phone and I don't know how to work Zoom really well on my phone. I love everybody sharing, and I also feel that with me, with self-reflection and with self-responsibility, I also don't want to cross the line of beating myself up when taking responsibility from where I'm at. So I look at what are the intentions behind it. I really, in that evaluation of whatever it is situation I'm in, I want to get clear on what are my intentions. And also I use the "it's not personal" factor a lot from years ago, Dominic Over Ease, because I was a great codependent. It was really good, and I still see fragments of it popping up now and then, which is really good for me because I'm constantly needing to upgrade this. But I really ask myself, what are the intentions? And then, is it necessary? Is it necessary? Is it really necessary? Is whatever I'm expending this energy on right now, I ask myself first and foremost, and on all of this, is it necessary? Is this really that important and necessary that I need to expend that much energy towards it? If my answer is an absolute yes, then it's time for a deeper dive for sure. But I also really can find myself, because of the codependent fragments that I'm still working through, self-blaming and going into that martyrism of self, you know what I mean? Like that judgment of self, and then I'm judging the judger, and it's a whole cute little cycle I do. But when I see myself falling into that, then I go back to my intentions. So
beautiful, beautiful points. And how many people can relate to a lot of what Debbie just said right now? Let's twinkle her. And also,
Debbie.
Yeah, very, very relatable, Debbie. And good steps. Thank you for the steps. I really like weighing, making sure that we're not giving our power away too much. That's beautiful. Thank you. Okay. I said, by the way, when I've got it, I don't always see hands up. So I'll do my best to keep an eye out for hands up. Thank you, everybody. All right, we move on. Oh, honesty and transparency. Okay, so that's what we're doing next, because we kind of got to go back a step. A reminder that there's a differentiation between honesty and transparency. The example I like to give is honesty might be the mother notices a cookie's missing and says, "Johnny, did you eat a cookie?" And Johnny says, "Well, yes, I did." He's being honest. Transparency is, "Mommy, I need to let you know that I already ate a cookie." Okay? In other words, honesty is one level. Transparency is a deeper level. Okay? And in both cases, honesty and transparency require safety. Because if little Johnny admits or acknowledges he ate the cookie and he gets whacked upside the head, he's not going to be honest the next time about being asked if he ate a cookie. And that's important for all of us to remember in our relationships, because we frequently demand that our partners, our family members, our friends are honest, and then we punish them for being honest. They're honest, and then we give them all sorts of shit for it, So if you want honesty, you got to make it safe. You got to, you got to make it safe. That's why sometimes, I'm not a big believer in don't ask, don't tell. I personally don't like that approach, but that's where that approach comes in, right? If it's not safe to be honest, don't ask, don't tell. Ideally, we have to create safety to be honest. We do that by self-responsibility and recognizing, okay, we're all perfectly human. So anything come up for people about honesty, transparency, and the need for safety for any of that? Anything come up that anybody wants to share? Mimi.
It came up, but I don't want to talk about it.
So you don't want to be you're not willing to be transparent. What do you need to feel? What do you need to feel safe to be transparent?
I just thought that was funny because that was the first thing that came to my head. But
yeah, no, that's a good one. That's a good one. That's a good one. Okay, I'm going to move on then. We're going to move on to the next one because we still got 5 left. We're halfway through. So the next one is emotional accountability. This one sometimes is a little harder for people to kind of recognize where they stand with it and even to explain it. Emotional accountability really is part of the emotional intelligence part of what we're learning in Love Coach Academy. And so it's the ability to be vulnerable, and the ability to differentiate between our emotions. A common example is that there are some, usually men, who, based on the way they were raised, it's okay to be angry. Anger is okay. But sadness, overwhelm, hurt, those are unacceptable emotions for that man to have. So the anger becomes a cover emotion for the more tender, vulnerable emotions that he does not believe he can express because that's not manly. Right? That's an example. Emotional accountability is recognizing, okay, my go-to is anger, but underneath my anger in this moment is I'm feeling really scared. I'm feeling really sad. Right? So that's part of it. Another part of it is that recognizing that all of our emotions are connected to unmet needs and values. So emotional accountability is I'm feeling sad because I'm really missing my wife today. I'm feeling scared because of your tone of voice and how it impacts me. Right? By the way, that example was kind of blamey, which we don't teach actually, but recognizing I'm noticing I'm feeling scared right now. And, oh yeah, I'm scared because his tone of voice is really impacting me. So emotional accountability is going deeper, acknowledging our emotions, understanding the wide rainbow of emotions. In Love Coach Academy, we have a list of feelings, and the big list is like 100 words. There's a lot of, and some of those words are wonderful. I love like discombobulated. It's a feeling. It's a very specific example. I love that word, discombobulated. I don't love experiencing it, but I love the word. So how do you all do with emotional accountability and connecting your emotions to what's going on in your life? Anybody want to share anything that comes up for you?
I feel that our wonderful list that you have provided us with of the human emotions and human needs is so helpful. And that here we've created a culture where we can say, what we feel and are encouraged to do so more and more. And yet out there in the world, you can sometimes notice like it's just not cool with certain people. They don't have time for it, or it's so finding ways to express it professionally or in a way that the other person understands the value of it is part of the learning curve.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. That's a really good point. And a couple of things. Let's twinkle, Deborah. Yeah, one of the things I love about our group here is that this is a safe place. And some of you are new. We've got 2 or 3 new people today. And, as you get to know us, you're going to find this a really good place to come and be totally real, totally honest. Something about that Deborah Haviland brought up that I want to acknowledge is in the outside world, we often will notice people struggle with other people's emotions because they're uncomfortable. And so if you are having discomfort with somebody else's emotions, it's all about learning to manage your discomfort rather than trying to change their emotions. The classic example of this is if we see a little kid crying and the parent, let's say the father, comes and says, "Don't cry, big boys don't cry." Well, actually what's really going on in that moment is that little kid needs to cry, and it's healthy to cry. And the father is uncomfortable with the crying because he's so disconnected from his own ability to cry, right? And then he's stuffing his own kid because he isn't managing his own discomfort. And it's a tragic example that probably all of us have observed and maybe experienced with our fathers, right? Is that a hand up, Mimi?
Yes, one that I noticed that I did with my children was if they were angry, I'd have them go and sit down quietly. And it's the opposite of what a child is naturally meant to do. They're naturally meant to express. And so to ask a child to sit down to process anger as opposed to actually feeling it through their body, or I would say, if you're going to be like that, go to your room. And instead you're asking a 4-year-old to do something that adults have a hard time doing on their own. So instead, like sitting with a person in process of, wow, you're really angry, and mirroring it back to them so that they can finish the process of releasing that. The same thing with when they fall and they hurt themselves. I was taught, get up, keep going. And instead, which creates narcissism. And so instead it's this, wow, you're really hurt. I really see that. And dropping in with them for a few minutes so they can process through it.
I love that, Mimi. That's such a beautiful expression. And thank you for that. That's a really good one. And you know what, even taking it further, learning to shake and shiver and dance and quiver. Again, I stuffed myself for a long time, and it was not, maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago, I learned that I did it this morning. I periodically, when I'm alone in bed, nobody's around, I'll shake and I'll shiver and I'll just let my mouth open and I'll move sounds, just to release energy. And kind of building on what Mimi said, I have a friend who's a parent, and she's an incredible parent, and I've known her a long time, and her kids have turned out so good. And when they got upset and they were doing something, she'd do it with them. She turned it into a dance. Instead of making them wrong, they were doing what they just needed to move the energy, right? In compassionate communication, we train our children that timeouts are not a punishment. Timeouts are what we all need, right? Parents need timeouts. A timeout is not a punishment. It's what we need. I was at an NVC Compassionate Communication Family Camp many years ago. I'm talking to a mom, and her son comes running up to us. He's like 9 or 10 years old. He comes running up, he says, Mommy, I need a timeout. I'm too mad to play fair right now. Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool, right? And we all want to get to that place. That's part of emotional accountability, because his mom had taught him timeouts aren't a punishment. It's what we need to take when we're too mad to play fair, right? So, okay, we're going to go on to the next one.
I have a question.
The next one is, I love this one. Curiosity. Curiosity is such a wonderful, wonderful quality. How do you do with being curious? Especially when your husband or boyfriend is still leaving the toilet seat up after all these years. Or when somebody in your world is doing something that you just don't understand. You just don't get it. It's like, why are they still doing that after all these years? And so curiosity is a wonderful, wonderful quality. I mentioned that Mandy and her boyfriend Israel and I all went out to dinner at Moma's Fish House last night, which is a really nice restaurant here in Paia. And there was an older couple that Mandy, some of you know her as the street angel, and she had her wings on and her street angel sign up while we were waiting to be seated. And this older couple came up to us and we started chatting, and they were there celebrating their 60th anniversary. Can you imagine 60 years married to the same person? And we're waiting for our table, so it was great. It gave me a chance to chat with them. And I asked them, so what's the key? What's the secret to 60 years? They were clearly happy with each other. And do you know the first thing the guy said was, we're really curious about each other. We're curious about life, and we're curious about each other. Isn't that cool, right? 60 years. That was just yesterday that happened. So curiosity is so important. I always love to think of that wonderful movie, E.T., and where E.T. and Elliot, the little boy, are so curious about each other, right? So just how do you do with being curious? Anybody have any thoughts or anything they want to share about curiosity?
I think the curious thing is very helpful. I've noticed it, like say where I might feel myself about in the past I would have gotten irritated about something, and if I could ask a curious question, I'm curious, you know, why you're thinking that or doing that or whatever. It opens up the field to understand the other person better and be in the place of compassionate listening and the willingness to understand their different point of view.
Great. Thank you very much, Deborah. Thank you. That's Twinkle Deborah. And Rico, I just noticed that you have a question. Where am I?
Oh, I'm having trouble. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so when I raise my hand and then it gets passed, it's embarrassing to me. So it makes me feel like I don't want to do that again. So thanks for, and then like when you speak, then Zoom works that your screen gets bigger, but that didn't work. So.
Thank you, Rico. And first of all, we're new. You know, I know you're new to how we work here. And maybe next time, if you can set up your camera so you're larger, because it's just been harder when I've got all the little boxes. I keep it in gallery view so I can kind of be monitoring and watching everyone. And so I really apologize if I missed seeing you have your hand up. But if you take a look at gallery view,
Right or anything, I guess.
Yeah. So anyway, I acknowledge you and I'm grateful to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you. So I wanted to speak about the slippery slope between like it being honesty and transparency or too much, and then like when you have to be accountable for your own emotions, and then when the slippery slope is when you're trying to make other people accountable for the way that you feel. And what comes up for me is like when you get triggered, like it's really, I think, advanced when you can be like, okay, that's my trigger and I have to own that, and I'm not going to make everybody adjust to, you know, because there was a trend of trigger warnings, and I felt like that, you know, as a speaker or as an event planner, having to always account or be responsible for all these different types of triggers was just like too much, you know, like where is other people's self-responsibility in this? And this is sort of applicable to big events or one-on-one conversations or anything.
Those are wonderful questions. And gosh, I could spend quite a bit of time on all of them. So I'm going to try and just give a little bit of response. Of course, inevitably, especially as coaches or anybody in a leadership position, we have to find that balance of being attuned to the group and attuned to the one. And if we're one-on-one with people, being attuned to their cultural understanding, right? I do not promote dogma of any form. I think it's always best to recognize that we always want to honor where a person is at and not overwhelm someone with our beliefs or our way of doing things, but to invite them, right? So ideally we want to invite connection, invite these tools. And even as I'm sharing these are all tools. They're not dogmatic, you know, they're not, you know, nobody's going to be policing whether or not you do this. You know, these are all ways for us to learn and grow together. So in terms of managing people being triggered, again, just we're blessed because in this particular community, we all are here today on a Saturday morning. You've got 1,000 options of what you could do. You're all choosing to be here. And some of you, like Debbie Garcia, Deborah Haviland, Michaela, have taken Mimi. Some of you have been taking this class for a long time. This is like your second, third time taking this course. And so we're all really committed to learning how to live in this awareness, to live in this consciousness of compassionate communication and emotional intelligence. So we're kind of blessed here. Obviously in the outside world, it's harder and we need to create safety and as best as we can, invite connection to people that, you know, we can, as best as we can, invite connection to people that, you know, we can, as best as we can, invite connection to people that, you know, we can, as best as we can, invite connection to people that, you know, we can, as best as we can, invite connection to people that, you know, we can, as best as we can, invite connection to people that, you know, we can, as best as we can, invite connection to people that, you know, we can, as best as we can, invite connection to people that, you know, we can, as best as we can, invite connection to people that, you know, we can, as best as we can, invite connection to people that, you know, we can, as best as we can, invite connection to people that, you know, we can, as best as we can, invite connection to people that, you know, we can, as best as we can, invite connection to people that, you know, we can, as best as we can, invite connection to people that, you know, we can, as best as we can, invite connection to people that, you know, we can, as best as we can, invite connection to people that, you know, we can, as best as we can, invite connection to people that, you know, we can, as best as we can, invite conne are not part of this way of thinking. But again, I think always the best way is just through example. You know, when people see, oh wow, you're managing yourself really well in the face of triggers. How do you do that, right? So modeling it through our own example is, I think, the ideal way. And thank you for your questions, Mariko. Definitely, I noticed that a couple of people gave you some thoughts about how to, next time if you're in the camera larger, it'll be easier for me to see you without a backlight behind you. And I'll try and pay closer attention. Okay, I'm gonna move back to our next one. And our next one is empathy and compassion. Understanding each other, being empathic, compassionate. And obviously, people often ask, well, what's the difference between empathy and compassion? And they're pretty similar. For me, I always like to show the scale. You know, we live in a planet of polarity where there's always a scale. So one end of the scale is apathy. It's kind of like, whatever, I don't care. And the other end of the scale is sympathy, which is pity. Oh, you poor creature, you poor pathetic thing, which kind of promotes a sense of victim. But right in the middle between sympathy and apathy is empathy. And it's in the heart. And we empathize. My heart feels your heart. Oh, you're sad? Let me feel sadness with you. You're angry. Let me imagine why you're angry. We don't judge another person's experience. We have compassion for it. Compassion to me is a little bit more of an intellectual understanding that then comes down into our heart. And empathy is feeling it with them, actually feeling it with them. And that's just my semantics. But the bottom line is, how do you do in this particular question? It's really having empathy for others and empathy for yourself. Remember, the most important form of empathy is self-empathy. So some of you might be amazing at showing compassion for others, but you're really hard on yourself. You're a 9 on compassion for others, but you're a 2 on empathy for yourself, or vice versa. Some of you might be amazing at self-empathy, but I don't give a shit about the rest of the world. I'm just taking care of me this time around. And of course, we want to find that balance of empathy and compassion for all, even Donald Trump. So, and I use political figures because they're usually the ones that we have the most group judgment. So any thoughts about empathy and compassion? Welcome, Aaron. Glad you're with us. Anybody have anything they want to share about empathy, compassion, or understanding? Okay, we'll go on to the next slide, but before we go on to the next slide, Mimi.
Scott, yeah, the thing that I appreciate that you usually talk about is fill your cup first. And so, you know, like if you're feeling like you don't have enough for other people to give that empathy or compassion, make sure that you're filled and doing your self-care and looking after yourself first. And then from the overflow is where you're able to help be, have a little bit more bandwidth to work with others.
Right. Thank you for the reminder of that. And yeah, it's really important. You know, we have to really be able to have a full cup to give to others. One other thing, because I noticed understanding is in there. When we're in a difficult conversation with someone, we always want to seek to understand. Always want to seek to understand. And that's the prime directive. So as we're grading ourselves, when you're in it with somebody, to what degree are you seeking to understand them? And to what degree are you wanting to be right? Or what degree are you wanting to defend yourself? Or to what degree are you wanting to get your way? So most of you have heard this before, I'll say it briefly. Those are the 3 pits that we as human beings fall into that stop us from understanding each other. Right, wrong, power struggle, and attack and defend. We feel attacked, we have to defend ourselves. So just remember as you're kind of looking at this, seeking to understand. I'm noticing Riko's question in the chat box where she asked about how to get talking. And actually, I do prefer if people raise their hands and I call upon people as opposed to people just unmuting themselves and jumping in. It is better. If however, you don't have your camera on, I can't see you raise your hand, then you can unmute yourself and say, hey, I have something I'd like to offer. But it's just a little bit easier for me to kind of manage everything if I can see people's cameras on and then people raising their hands. Debbie Garcia, I see you've got your hand up in terms of the delay bobber. Is that still, yeah. Okay, so I'm putting the spotlight on you, Debbie.
Unmute. Hi, everybody again. I raised curiosity. I'm just going to take a step back and just say that that's probably my favorite tool that you've taught, Scott, because it was the biggest life changer for me. It allowed me to be curious about myself, and being curious about self was a big deal because in my journey, it's all been, everything always comes back to me and how that I am, where is this mine? Where is this mine? Where is this somebody else's? And that tool of curiosity has been a life saver and a life changer. It's so powerful. The other is challenge, the one you were just talking about, when what's real for another person, or being empathetic where somebody is sitting, where they are right where they're at, is really requires that releasing the need to be right, right or wrong, or to make bad, wrong, stupid, as Paul Sterling would say. But really allowing people to be right where they're at and to be okay, and not think that I need to fix them or change where they're at or change who they are. And I still find myself doing this, but then that means that I'm trying to say that I'm right about something that I'm not even actually, who knows if I'm right about. I might be wrong, and tomorrow I'm going to find out. So curiosity, it really helps, because you really get to ask yourself, or I ask myself the question, all right, Debbie, I'm really curious. Like, why is this a thing right now? And also looking for the good in whatever situation, really getting curious about what is this showing me for me? Not it's against me, not it's not for me, but what is this doing, and how can I make this work with the relationship? Christopher, my son's a good one, because a lot of times I don't hear him just out of bad habits. And so those habits, using these tools and breaking some of those habits has been vital. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. That's all Twinkle Debbie Garcia for that wonderful wisdom. Thank you, Debbie. Really good stuff there. Thank you. And Kelsey, your puppy is totally adorable, by the way. I gotta say, I'm a puppy dog lover, and I've been enjoying your puppy over your shoulder. All right. What's his name?
His name is Edward.
Edward, of course. He looks like an Edward. Okay. I'm a sucker for dogs. All right. We just got two more. Self-love. Self-love. How committed are you? This kind of goes back to what Mimi brought up about how the more we fill our cup, the more we have to give to others. And so when we have a commitment to self-love, then we can truly be an embodiment of love and be of service through that expression. Just really, this one I'm not going to come back to us right away. I want you to really think about this. How do you do with self-love? And can you see that the more committed you are to truly self-love, not narcissism, but filling yourself up, being well-resourced, then you can be an embodiment of love. You're living it through service, through your relationships. You're expressing love in a very embodied way. Love that. So just coming back to the group. Does anything come up for anyone that You want to share about that? So, bring up anything, a challenge, or Deborah Haviland?
I definitely feel like this is the center of the path. And, finding the daily practices that help us really anchor into self-love and stay in self-love so that we can fill our cup and be the love, as you said, is so important in noticing the minute we go out of it and then be willing to do whatever it takes to clear it or apologize to ourselves or another and then come back to love, to me, is the path.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Big twinkling for Deborah. And yeah, there it is. It's like, I mean, most of you have heard me say that the meaning of life is learning to love, starting with ourselves. Sounds like Laura Eldridge. You want to say something, Laura?
Hi, yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm still traveling to the doctor right now, but I just want to say something that's been so helpful for me during this class is, and I have taken this maybe about 4 times with you, and it's so beautiful to do this reflection of like, wow, where am I now? But I've also noticed that during their self-reflection, there's also been some self-judgment. And one of the tools that I was using this entire time was EFT, emotional freedom technique, and really giving myself that, even though I'm feeling deregulated right now because of the self-judgment, I deeply and completely love and accept myself as I was tapping on my hand and my collarbone and my eyes and my face, just so that I could ground myself back in my body and realize that, no matter what self-judgment is there, that I'm okay in this moment. And it's absolutely beautiful. So I just wanted to offer that to the group.
Thank you. Let's all twinkle, Laura. Imagine everybody's twinkling you right now, Laura. Feel those twinkles. Yeah, that's really right on. Thank you. And thank you, Debbie Garcia. I did notice that you brought up my puppy, who I'm missing very much. There's little Jasmine Bear.
She just came up here. Look at this face. I mean, oh my gosh. She just had her beautiful hair done and she looks fabulous.
Thank you very much.
Self-love is huge. And I think this is a journey that we're all going to be on constantly every day. At least for me, that's in my world. But it's loving the parts of me that I didn't think were lovable and loving the dark with the light. Just like we love nighttime when it's nighttime, but when it's dark during the day, that doesn't serve us, So it's all perception, really. So how can we dive into a deeper space of loving every part of our being? And, we hear it all the time. I'm a work in progress and all of that. And it's beyond a little bit true. So self-love to me is just taking it easier. But this class, for anybody who's new here, I just want to give a huge shout out. Listen, I am stoked you're here. This is the best decision you ever made. After 3 years, I will be taking these classes for the rest of my existence, because there's never a place where I can stop growing with communication and growing with self-love, growing with empathy, growing with how to love others fully and completely right where they're at, and so just for everybody, if there's some of this stuff that it's not quite like, you're kind of like, it's okay, like, love that you're right there with the that curiosity tool. It's brilliant. So anyway, that's all. And Jazzy loves you too, Scott.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right. We are down to our very last one. And the last tool of self-mastery is sacred mirrors. Seeing yourself in everything and everyone. Very much what Debbie Garcia was talking about a little while ago. What am I learning about myself from this reflection? So how do you do at that? And for some people, this might be an entirely new idea, that everybody and everything in this world is a mirror reflecting back our understanding or our imagining about ourselves. yourself. And some of you are further along with that. And again, there's never no right or wrong. We're just sharing tools, ideas, ways of doing life. No right or wrong. But how do you do with seeing yourself in others? When you're judging somebody, how do you do at saying, wow, he's so angry all the time, but sometimes I am angry a lot too. Or even just adding the words, just like me. Wow, how selfish, just like me. Wow, how aggravating, just like me. Like recognizing that doesn't mean that we are exactly the same as everybody else, but that oftentimes people reflect to us certain qualities, certain things that are teaching us about how we see the world. Another one too, because oftentimes they'll say, no, wait a minute. Okay, so, and they'll bring up an example of somebody, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but I'll just use Donald Trump as an example. I recently read a poll that even people who love Trump acknowledge he's very self-centered. So I'm just going to go with that. So let's say somebody is really in the awareness of how self-centered or perhaps even narcissistic they perceive Donald Trump to be. And they say, well, now, wait a minute, with the sacred mirror thing, I am genuinely not self-centered. I'm always giving to other people. I'm not a self-centered person. And I'd say everybody around them agrees, yeah, Mimi is not self-centered. She's a giver. I'll use her as an example. Well, even if she's triggered by the self-centered piece, it's not because it's reflecting her own self-centeredness. Maybe it's triggering her because it's not meeting her value for consideration of others, right? So sometimes a sacred mirror shows us we get angry because what they aren't doing is actually something we really value. We have a high value for respect, so people that are disrespectful trigger us. We have a high value for care, people that are not caring trigger us. They're still serving as a sacred mirror. They're still reflecting back to us something about ourselves. Okay. Does it make sense to everybody? So, all right. Kelsey.
I just wanted to say thank you for that example because that was a really clear piece. And I think, that was maybe one of the first things that I ever learned, like on my journey, is how we're a reflection. But then, coming into relationship, yeah, that was like such a clear example of like, oh, that's how it reflects in like other values and other ways in my life. So I like work with that piece on and off, and that was just a really great reminder. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm glad that it impacted you, Kelsey. That's great. Meets my need for efficiency. Chick, I'm putting the spotlight on you.
Okay. I was wondering if part of the sacred mirrors is that oftentimes maybe they're reflecting our shadow, the parts of ourselves that we don't like about ourselves, and not judging them for being that way because we don't allow ourselves to be that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I was using the words just like me. That sometimes when we are judging somebody else, if we can be in the awareness of, wow, he's really being selfish right now. Just like me, I can be selfish too. So, there's a school of thought that absolutely everything that one human being does, we are capable of ourselves. Even the most peaceful person, theoretically, is capable of killing another if they were trying to protect themselves or their family. Right? So just being in that awareness that oftentimes sacred mirrors is reflecting something about ourselves that maybe we struggle to see clearly. Mimi, and then Erin.
Yes, I recognize my battery is almost flat, so just an FYI. So if I'm gone, poof, then that's what happened. The those core needs that I was just picking up on from a couple of days ago was if my top need is certainty and security, and then I have another top need, and that is contribution, and then somebody comes along and their top need is uncertainty, like the people who like to jump off cliffs on K2 or jump out of helicopters into avalanche zones. Like for me, that would feel hugely unsafe, and I would feel really disrespected if those were, if I didn't understand that that's that person's top need. So I think also recognizing, like, for somebody like Trump, maybe his top need, based on early childhood stuff or based on whatever, is significance and popularity, or possibly contribution, or possibly growth. That if my top need is love and security, that is not going to feel very safe for me to show up in a loving manner with that person. So also considering, like, what are my top two needs, and what are my conflict, what are their top two needs, so that I'm recognizing and getting into this place of, wow, I can see that from your point of view, these are how you're getting your needs met. You're not being narcissistic. You're just in your place of deeply getting your needs met.
Thank you very much for that. Let's twinkle Mimi for that, radiance for that. Thank you so much. Yeah, the language I like to use, just a slight adjustment, is, oh, he has a really high value for respect. Because if we language it with top needs, and I love what you said, it was really, really, really wonderful. But then somebody might argue, well, I don't know if that's his top need, because then but just a high value for, right? A high need for, just gives a little more wiggle room, right? Any other kind of overall thoughts? Oh yeah, Aaron, that's right. Thank you for reminding me. Hi, Aaron.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for this meeting. Again, I love this. You know, I'm late because I was actually dealing with some sacred mirror work, and it was kind of it was an emergency. And I just wanted to touch on this because you all made such good points that I'd like to affirm. And that is, as the mirror comes up in our experience of life, because it's all reflective, I've been really being shown to embrace the wholeness of reality, like Jung would speak of the shadow, like really embrace. Like, to me, the shadow needs most of our love, because we want to enlighten and ascend that shadow. And the mirror is so effective, right? When we have shadows on our eyes or whatever, we check in the mirror so that we can enlighten and ascend those shadows. And so what I've been finding is so powerful is, like you say, to relate. You know, relationship is based on relating. And so what I've found too is our neurons, when they think of, say, shadows or everything in our reality, they're literally firing an interactive, like whatever story we know, they're creating chemical molecules that match that story. And so we're subjecting our intercellular world to whatever story we're cognizing and reviewing. And so it's just such an important revelation for us all to really embrace the holistic nature of ourselves and each other in love.
Wow, let's give a big twinkling to Aaron. Thank you for that. And I always appreciate how Aaron takes us into a beautiful mystical place. So thank you. I noticed Laura, who's now Laura Lace, asked about a list. And yes, this is the universal list of human needs, values, desires. And what I'll do is, if any of you don't have this list yet, because I know we have some new people, please put into the chat box or send me a Facebook private message. Hey, Scott, send me the list of universal human needs. And I'll do so. You can send that to me in Facebook Messenger, Scott Thomas on the planet. I'll pop it into the chat box here. All right, we are wrapping up. I need to actually have a little breakfast, and then I'm teaching a couple of classes today at this retreat that I'm at here in Maui. So I want to thank everybody for being here today. for sharing your wisdom, your tools, and most of all, just, gosh, it's so wonderful to our commitment to learn and to grow together. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I am also going to try a little experiment. On Wednesday, we're going to do our practice group 1 hour later than usual. Honestly, it's because I'm teaching another class here in Maui, so I'm not going to, or actually in Maui. So I want to be able to do it at 6 o'clock Pacific time, but I'm going to do it at 7 o'clock Pacific time. It'll be a little bit late for you, Mimi. It'll be 10 p.m. East Coast time. But I'm going to give it a try, just see what happens. So you're all invited to come to our practice group Wednesday night at 7 o'clock Pacific time. And we'll be practicing some of what we talked about today. We'll be talking about, but going into pods and practicing some of these tools. So thank you everybody for joining us. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And I look forward to my next connection with each and every one of you. Take care, everybody.